Okay, Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. Last meeting we discussed about the ano nga yun? About the Chronicles of Pigapetta. At the same time, we also discussed the Kartilya ng Katipunan. Okay? We will not discuss the lesson but rather on we learned how to analyze the document or the primary sources. In the Chronicles of Pigapetta, yung analysis natin, malaki ang epekto ng personalidad at saka yung origin ni Pigapetta. Compare mo doon sa, kung hindi galing sa Europe, kung hindi galing sa Spain ang nagsulat. Because Pigapetta is an Italian nobleman, makikita mo sa kanyang gawa yung pagiging noble, yung pagiging advanced in the civilization. The way how he portray and how he describe the Philippines ay mayroong kaakibat na koneksyon doon sa pagiging nobleman at saka yung pagiging tao na galing sa Europe. Okay. Doon naman sa Kartilya ng Katipunan, nakita natin yung Kartilya na parang code of ethics. Parang guidelines, we divided into two. Yung ibang parte ng Kartilya ng Katipunan ay nagtuturo kung paano isang maging mabuting katipunero. Yung another side, nakita natin, is kung paano makitungo sa kapwa-tao. And now, we will analyze the primary documents regarding the proclamation of the Philippine independence. Again, we are not here just to clarify everyone. We are not discussing the history as if we are on the history, but rather we are focusing only on the primary sources and the evidences that we have through analysis. No? Wala tayong wala tayong klase na gusto nating i-discuss through and through yung history ng Philippine independence, but rather on the selected primary documents presented during the proclamation. So yun ang pag-uusapan natin, yun ang gagamitan natin ng analysis, no? The speech of the Corazon Aquino was what I have told you before is kayo na mismo mag-a-analyze at saka yung caricature, no? Kayo mag-a-analyze, babasahin ninyo, manonood kayo sa YouTube, kayo mag-a-analyze kung anong napapansin niyo dun sa sinasabi ni Cory at kanong nilalaman ng sinasabi ni Cory. But as of today, we will be discussing the proclamation of the Philippine independence. Okay? Malinaw ba? Naririnig?
Yes.
Okay. Our learning objectives for this morning, by the end of this lesson, the students will be able to explain the content and context of the proclamation of the Philippine independence document. Identify the main cause of proclamation, proclaiming independence against colonizer, and discuss the political motivations behind proclamation. Okay. So, the Philippine Declaration of Independence was proclaimed on June 12, 1898 in Kawit, Cavite, El Viejo, present-day Kawit, Cavite. With the public reading of the Act of Declaration of Independence, in Spanish is Acta de la Proclamación de Independencia del Pueblo Filipino. Okay? Yun naman talaga ang original text, no? Acta de la Proclamación de Independencia del Pueblo Filipino. Filipino Revolutionary Forces under General Emilio Aguinaldo at that time, until such time he became the first president of the Republic, proclaimed the sovereignty and independence of the Philippine Islands from the colonial rule of Spain. However, the government of the Republic, on a determined fought a losing struggle against the superior armed force of the United States in an effort to defend and preserve the independence of the Philippines. Hence, of July 4, 1946, at the Luneta, Philippines declared the full independence of the Republic of the Philippines from American sovereignty. Okay? So, ang ating unang independence, kung bakit nagaganap ito sa June 12, because that is the first declaration of independence away from against the Philippine colonizer, which is the Spain. Okay. The Philippine Revolution passed through the distinct stages. First, embraced the events and development that took place from the outbreak of the Katipunan Revolt in the later part of August 1896, pag-usapan natin yan sa Cartilla, to the cessation of hostilities following the conclusion of the Pact of Piak na Bato on December 14, 1897. It was in the stage that Jose Rizal was executed December 30, 1896 for alleged complicity in the revolutionary movement. It was also in the stage that the Katipunan organization gave way to a new revolutionary government with a new group of leaders to lead and direct the revolution against the Spanish government in the Philippines. The new government was set up in Cavite in March 1897 with Emilio Aguinaldo as president. Okay? The second stage lasted from the resumption of the war against Spain shortly after the return of Aguinaldo from Hong Kong on May 19, 1898 to the outbreak of hostilities between Filipino-American forces earlier in February 1899. The stage of revolution witnessed events as far-reaching significance in the political history of the Philippines. On May 1, 1898, Dewey's naval force destroyed the Spanish naval in the Battle of Manila Bay, thereby dealing a mortal blow on Spanish colonial power in the Philippines. 3 months later, August 13, 1898, Manila fell into the hands of American forces. What happened here? The American forces did not recognize the Katipuneros' part or yung kanilang participation during the American-Spanish War. Okay? They just used navals. But in the actual arena, in the actual battlefield, the Filipino soldiers are there. No? They are there fighting against Spain in Manila. But after Manila fell into the hands of the American forces, they did not recognize the Filipino people's part during the war. On December 10, 1898, Spain ceded by treaty the Philippines to the United States. In this stage, the Filipino people had their first experience of political independence and had occasion to show their capacity as a free and independent nation to manage their national affairs. So in 1896, we declare independence against the colonizer, the Spain. Noong 1899 naman, during the war, with the help of the American troops, American power, they did not recognize us. Wala na. Hindi na tayo na-recognize. Ganun ang naging kalakaran. Wala na sila ngayong pakialam sa atin. So, hindi na tayo na-recognize as Filipino free government or independent government. Kaya, balik naman tayo sa another struggle. Kasi sinabi ko nga sa Kartilya ng Katipunan, panandaliang kalayaan lang nakuha natin. But, on 1845, doon natin nakuha yung full independence na binigay ng United States of America. Okay? Itong sinasabi ko sa inyo na the treaty between the American and the Spain, doon na nasali yung Mindanao, though Mindanao is not never been colonized by the Spain. Sinali nila yon doon sa pagbenta, doon sa treaty nila sa Amerika. Kaya yan ang pinaglalaban ng mga Moro brothers and sisters natin here in the Philippine Archipelago, one of the Philippine Archipelago, which is the entire Mindanao, that they claim, that the Bangsamoro people claim, that we never been colonized by the Spain, and how come that we are part of the treaty? No? Bakit tayo nabenta? Kaya ganon. A significant, memorable event of the stage of the revolution was the coming into being September 15, 1898 of the Malolos Congress. Of course, after declaration of the independence on September 15, nagkaroon tayo ng Malolos Congress. Whereas in every district, merong representative as part of the Congress. The Congress was the third of the representative assemblies, which is the course of the revolution, arose to assume a vital role in the affairs of the revolution. First of this was the Assembly of the Katipunan leaders, which met in the Tejeros, San Francisco del Malabon, Cavite on March 22, 1897. The Tejeros Convention, as the meeting is commonly called, set up a new revolutionary government with the President Emilio Aguinaldo as the president of the revolutionary government, to direct and carry on the armed struggle for the independence of the Philippines. The second came into being November 1, 1897 at Piak na Bato. The assembly was composed of leaders of the revolution who were in the Piak of the Bato at that time. Its avowed purpose was to modify the constitutional basis of the revolutionary government. So doon nagsimula ang ating lahat. From revolutionary government, nakagawa tayo ng Malolos Constitution. The first ever constitution made by the Filipino people for the Filipino people. Sino ito? Ayan. Significant and memorable events. Masyadong ano. So let us move into the proclamation. Sabi ko nga kanina, on June 12, 1898, around 4 and 5 in the evening in Cavite at the ancestral home of General Emilio Aguinaldo, the act of the Declaration of Independence was organized and written and read by Ambrosio Reyes Bautista in Spanish. The declaration was signed by 98 people, among them an American Army officer who witnessed the proclamation. So ito ngayon ang Amerikano. They are part of our independence. But I don't know how they come up to such idea of not recognizing the Philippine independence after winning the battle against the Spain. Hindi tayo kasama sila sa mga pumirma. Okay? 98 people. So, introduced with a portrayals of the conditions in the Philippines amidst the Spanish frontier time frame. Let me read to you the part of the proclamation. Later, mag-analyze tayo. Taking into consideration that their inhabitants being already weary of bearing a ominous yoke of Spanish domination on account of the arbitrary arrest and harsh treatment practiced by the civil guards to the extent of causing death with the connivance and even with the express orders of their commanders, who sometimes went to the extreme of ordering the shooting of prisoners under the pretext that they were attempting to escape, in violations of the provisions of the regulations of their corps, which abuses were unpunished, and on account of the unjust deportations especially those decreed by General Blanco or eminent personages and high social position, and the instigation of the archbishop, no? Archbishop and friars interested in keeping them out of the way for their own selfish and avaricious purpose. Deportations which are quickly brought about by the method of procedure more execrable than that of the Inquisition, and which every civilized nation reject on account of a decision being rendered without hearing of the personal accused. So ito yung hugot. This is the hugot of the proclamation. Because of the treatment, harsh treatment, arbitrary arrest, no? Because of punishment of the Guardia Civil to the prisoners of the Filipino people. Yung prisong Filipino people, they punish it. Then after that, that could cause death to them. So this is a direct order or indirect order of the commanders or even General Blanco or the Archbishop or yung mga friars because of their self-interest. So ito yung hugot natin. Introduction of portrayals of the condition of the Philippines. Isinaad dito sa proclamation kung ano ang kondisyon ng Pilipinas, bakit tayo nag-proclaim ng independence. Next slide. In the town of Cavite Viejo, in this province of Cavite, of the 12th day of June 1898, before me, Don Ambrosio Renzales Bautista, Auditor of War and Special Commissioner appointed to proclaim and solemnize this act by the dictatorial government of these Philippine Islands for the purpose and by virtue of the circular address by the eminent dictator of the same, Don Emilio Aguinaldo E. Fami. Yan yung laman ng Philippine Independence. Another, we acknowledge, makinig na mabuti, mamaya mag-analyze tayo kung napapansin niyo. We acknowledge, approve, and confirm together with the orders that they have been issued therefrom the dictatorship established by Don Emilio Aguinaldo, whom we honor as supreme chief of this nation, which this day commences to have a life of its own, in the belief that he is instrument selected by God, in spite of his humble origin, to effect the redemption of this unfortunate people, as foretold by Dr. Jose Rizal in the magnificent verses which he composed when he was preparing to be shot, liberating them from the yoke of the Spanish domination and the punishment of the impunity with which their government allowed the commission of abuse by its subordinates. Ayan, ang mga hugot ng proclamation. Another set. And final. Sino ba ito? And finally, it was anonymously resolved that this nation, independent from this day, must use the flag, use therefore, dito sinabi ng proclamation kung ano yung flag ng Pilipinas, na? Ano yung mga color. Therefore, was designed the colors described in the accompanying drawing with design representing in the natural colors of three arms referred to. The white triangle represents the distinct emblem of the famous Katipunan Society, which by means of its compact of blood urged on the masses of the people to insurrection. The three stars represent the three principal islands of this archipelago, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, and Panay, in which this insurrectionary movement broke out. The sun represents gigantic strides that have been made by the sons of this land on the road of progress and civilization. Its 8 rays symbolizes the 8 provinces of Manila. Okay yan, Cavite, Bulacan, Pampanga. Ito yung mga battlefield noon. Cavite, Bulacan, Pampanga, Nueva Ecija, Bataan, Laguna, and Batangas, which were declared in the state of war almost as soon as the first insurrectionary movement was initiated. And the colors blue, red, and white commemorate those of flag of the United States of America in manifestation of our profound gratitude towards that great nation for the disinterested protection she is extending to us and will continue to extend to us. O, ganyan lang. Anong analysis natin ngayon? What is our analysis? Based on the proclamation. Anong napapansin natin? Balik tayo sa ano. Ito yung analysis natin. The document reflects the general revolutionary sentiment of the period. The friar abuse, racial discrimination, and inequality before the law. Yun yung mga hugot nila kung bakit tayo nagkaroon ng independence. Kasi ito yung pinaglalaban natin. Friar abuse, racial discrimination, and equality before the law. But the question today is, if we are independent because we fight against this, why there is still racial discrimination in this land? Why there is still inequality before the law? Bakit maraming mahihirap ang nagsasampa ng kaso na hindi nananalo? Kung totoong tayo ay nakalaya because it is part of the Declaration of the Philippine Independence. Doon sa kanyang documents that the Philippine is not anymore and could never be abused by friars. There will be no racial discrimination because we are independent. There will be no inequality before the law because we are independent. Now the question is why there is still racial discrimination and inequality before the law. Ang ibig bang sabihin nito, we are just independence by means of documents? Malaya lang ba tayo dahil sa isang pirasong papel? But in reality, in our world today, kung napapansin ninyo, there is a racial discrimination. There is inequality before the law. So are we really independent? Lumaya ba talaga tayo? Another analysis. Of course, they acknowledge Gomborza execution and Nasoresal martyrdom. Yan yung makita natin doon sa proclamation of the Philippine Independence. Okay? The foundation of KKK was not mentioned, including Bonifacio. Diba? Hindi nyo napansin yun? Ala. Si Bonifacio naman talagang nagdala nitong revolutionary eh. Siya ang unang taong nagtatag ng KKK. Bakit hindi na-mention sa proclamation of the Philippine Independence? The land revolt wasn't mentioned. Oy, hindi ba yun na-recognize ng independence natin? That the very first member of the KKK are the landless owner? A landless farmer? Yung mga Pilipinong ninakawan ng lupa, hindi ba yun in-include? That the reason why we revolt, the primary reason why we revolt because of the land reform. Kasi inagawan tayo ng lupa ng mananakop. Bakit hindi na-mention yun? Yan ang analysis natin. Another thing, it contains political motive and bias. Why? Because the Magdalo and the Magdiwang, led by Bonifacio and Aguinaldo at that time, when they are separated, when the Katipunan is divided into two, is not mentioned. Okay? So there is a political motive and bias in the proclamation of the Philippine independence. But Kahit ganun pa man ang napapansin natin by analysis, no? We are not here to hate one another. We are not here to hate Aguinaldo. Instead of hating Aguinaldo, we must say thanks to Aguinaldo for proclaiming the Philippine independence. Kasi kung hindi natin alam kung anong naabot natin ngayon. So thank you for that, Aguinaldo. But as to the analysis of the Philippine history, we can analyze that there is something wrong with the proclamation. There is a political motive and bias in the proclamation doon sa documents ng declaration. Okay? Another thing, ang pinaka-aabangan ng lahat, ang activity. Okay? Do content and context analysis of the late President Corazon Aquino's speech before the Congress. So, ang gagawin nyo dito, gagawa kayo ng reflection letter, reflection paper ninyo. Ang laman ng reflection paper ninyo is your reaction at the same time your analysis on late President Corazon Aquino's speech before the Congress. Ano ang kanyang epekto noon? Anong epekto ngayon? I-analyze niyo yan. Okay? Para makita natin if you're learning how to analyze things. Okay? Kung wala nang tanong, this will end our discussion. Assalamualaikum and good morning.